Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. Thank you for listening today. I'm Sean, and I'm glad you are here. This is Season 10. However, we're going to do a throwback to Season 4 in a little bit. But Kyle, first, bring us up to speed with what you are working on right now. What's keeping you busy outside of the podcast?
As you know, we do multiple Ride Ataxia events across the country to raise money for the Friedrich's Ataxia Research Alliance. Already this year we had Gainesville, Florida, and Chicago, Illinois, which actually I wouldn't say it's in Chicago. It's about an hour outside the city. But anyway, the next one that's coming up is Ride Ataxia Philadelphia, and it's our biggest event. It's our biggest fundraising event for Ride Ataxia, and it's so much fun because we have the patient symposium that same weekend. So lots of families that have FA come out from all over the country and some internationally as well.
Yeah.
It's always a really good time, and I encourage people to come out. Some of the things that we're doing differently for the ride this year is we're going to be back at Montgomery County Community College, which I love, and I hope everybody does too. And we're going to do the event on the asphalt in the parking lot this year, and that will increase wheelchair accessibility for the event. In the past, we've had it on the grass, and as we all know, that's not the easiest thing when you're in a manual wheelchair.
Well,
so,
that's good to hear. Yeah.
It's exciting upgrades that we're making, specific to our community and making it a little more accessible for people with disabilities, including you and me.
We'll be sure to link Ride Ataxia in our show notes. It's a popular event for people to attend and connect with other families, especially if maybe they're new to the FA world. So we want you to check that out, especially if you're on the East Coast or in the Philly area.
Sean, real quick, it's Sunday, October 8th. I don't think I said that.
So we get a little bit of time. So start making your plans, checking out flights, and get your tires aired up and your bike serviced, tuned up, all those good things.
Yeah.
Kyle, we're doing a quote of the week segment for season 10, and I do believe it's your turn. So what quote is sticking out to you this week?
Well, I was laying in bed the other day, and I don't even remember.
Let's skip this part. I don't know where you're going with this story, but it's none of our business.
I was trying to convince myself to get out of bed in the morning. I was really tired. And anyway, every once in a while, this quote just comes into my head, and it's from forever ago. A movie from a long time ago, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Oh, wow.
And the quote is, "Be excellent to each other." It's a really good quote to start the day with, right? Like, all right, be good to other people. That's what I'm going to try and do today. So I love that quote.
And that's the quote of the week. Thank you, Kyle. I think that does set us up well for the conversation we're going to have and the replay we're featuring, right? It's all about how we treat one another and how we are towards those around us. So share the idea with our listeners.
Way back in 2020, we each had an interaction with another person that challenged the way we respond to people that don't understand our disability and may have reactions that are unknowingly unpleasant or even rude. We're going to play episode 114, which came out in August of 2020. And then we're going to talk about how our attitudes may have changed since then. Here's a condensed version of episode 114. I'm like going through Instagram and it's nice out. So I'm sitting in the shade and I'm like, I'll just get a couple things done here on my phone, send a couple emails, whatever. I'm sitting in the shade and it's nice out. And like I said, like 4 times already.
Your first time going out in like 6 months or something.
Yeah, that's true too, is that it just felt good to be out, right? So I'm sitting there on my phone and this lady comes up to me, this older lady. She has a white bag in her hand and a bottle of water in her other hand. She's like, hey, I'm from the church right down there. We just made a whole bunch of lunches to give out, and we have a bunch left over. So would you like one or a few? And I'm like, all right, so, yeah, sure, why not, right? Set them right there on the ground. Thank you. And she goes, so is someone coming to pick you up? And I'm like, no, that's my van right there. I was just, enjoying the shade real quick here. And she's like, okay, so how long have you, been in a wheelchair? And I'm like, oh, I have a progressive disease, do my whole spiel. And she's like, oh, all right. So can I pray for you? Or somebody in your family or something. And I'm like, okay, great. Yeah, I said, my family lives in California, and you can pray for me or them. And everyone always needs prayers, right? They're doing great, but everyone always needs prayers. So, we're talking a little bit, and for some reason, she goes, can you use the computer? And I say, yeah, I use it every day at work. And she goes, oh, wow, where do you work? And I tell her at the Friedrichs Ataxia Research Alliance. And, so I go through this whole thing, and it's just clear to me that she was assuming she saw somebody in a wheelchair, and it was this poor, helpless person. I guess no fault to her, right? Like, that's how I saw myself, recognize myself as a disabled person. Like, I'm not blaming her, but I'm, her whole thing was, oh, but you poor thing. Not that she said that outwardly, right? And so I just wanted to recognize the assumptions that we make about people, because I noticed it, and I'm sure it's happened to you before too, right?
Yeah, I think there is so much in your story there that I would love to break down. But I think ultimately you're right.
Okay, yeah.
And I've done it myself. You have this preconceived notion of a thing, right, a person, a situation, a brand, whatever it may be. And so you automatically have these assumptions about a result or a piece of it, right? And I think the more we actually talk about it, whether it's something we've done or that we notice is being, it's being done toward us, I think the more we talk about it, the better we get at recognizing when we do things that are maybe unfair. Or, I think unfair is a fine way to put it. But I do think there's validity in just talking about it, right? Ultimately, I think we all get better just simply talking about things.
I agree. Like I said, I'm not pissed or blaming this lady. This is really an opportunity for self-reflection, sure. I think. I see something that she's doing that I also can admit that I've done before, and maybe it's not the best thing to do, right?
It's probably not the fair thing to do. Yeah.
Right.
So let's Let's start from the beginning.
All
So,
right.
like you said, this lady walks up to you, and, in her head, she maybe is thinking, poor, helpless soul.
Right.
Do you think her questions are fair or inappropriate?
You know what? Her questions were inappropriate. And I think that it is more like it would have been welcome if she said, "Hey, how are you? I'm Debra," whatever her name was. "And how's it going today? It's a beautiful day." And just start a conversation, right? She's meeting somebody. But her approach was to be surprised when I told her that I was about to get in my van and go home. Like somebody wasn't picking me up. There was no one taking care of me because I can't take care of myself. Sure. And how much of this is what she's saying and how much of it is how I'm interpreting it too, I guess, is part of the thing. So, yeah.
So it's, it sounded like she approached you with the offering of a free meal, right? Like she has some leftovers.
Yeah.
Do you think she would have made such an offer if you were just sitting on the grass, no wheelchair in sight?
The way I interpret it, no. Is that, the wheelchair was the thing that tipped her off that something might be that this person might be a little more helpless than anyone else.
So
and you can tell that I'm starting to get a little worked up about this, right? So there's obviously some personal whatever in there.
Totally, I'm with you on that, and I've got a story. It actually just took place this week as well, but I'll get back to that in a minute. So, in my thinking, she approaches you and says, "Hey, what's going on? I'm down the street from the church. We made all these meals. Do you want one or some?" To me, I don't know that I would think that approach is inappropriate, right? Later, her questions get maybe off topic,
right? Okay,
and then you're like, "Sure, why not?" And then it's somebody coming to pick you up.
Yes.
So, in a sense, I think of that as maybe she's just seeing if you need a ride.
Yeah.
Do you I've done that with probably younger people or even at work, right? Somebody gets out of class and then they're kind of standing at the front door for 20 minutes. I'm like, "Are you okay? Do you need a ride? Is your ride coming?" I'm just trying to help make sure they get home. I don't necessarily think they're helpless. So talk to me about that. Do you think she was just trying to help make sure you weren't stuck? Or do you think she was trying to get into your business?
So, Sean, there's an important admission that I need to make.
Okay.
Is that I was sitting in front of a community center. And I think it's a center that serves underserved populations.
Okay.
And so maybe it's a spot where people sit or hang out that might need help, right?
Sure. Or given that context, her frame of mind is that if there's a stranger or a new person, a new face, they're only here because they need help.
Right,
maybe.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, so far, I think her approach is fair. I'm just saying.
So
that's
far,
where I'm
lady 2, Kyle 0.
That's just my thinking. Okay, but then, like you said, she began to be surprised. Like, "Oh, you have a job? Oh, wait, you can drive?"
Yeah.
Okay, so where would you say she crossed the line between just being a nice bystander to being inappropriate?
I think it's the surprise at the job thing. And, the other thing was I was about to go pick up my truck because it was at the bike shop. And she's like, "Oh, you ride a bike?" And I'm like, yeah, I've ridden across country twice. Wow, like, all right, yeah, that I appreciate the enthusiasm, but so maybe it's not so much cross the line as my interpretation of it too. So
Yeah, I'm with you because I think there is at least for me, there's a struggle between identifying what's fair and what's inappropriate. Because part of me thinks it's fair and reasonable, and I think very important that people ask questions, right? That's part of the process of learning and growing and expanding our thinking or our own perception of reality. So I do believe it's absolutely imperative that people ask questions. But then the other side of me is like, okay, am I thinking they need to ask certain questions? Does it matter what tone they ask the question in? Because to me, the answer is yes. But then...
yeah, I think the tone is the most important.
I agree. Is it fair, though, for you and I to have... to want a certain set of questions and to want them in a certain format?
Yeah, I know.
And I'm just for the sake of conversation.
No, I think that's the ultimate question that we're asking ourselves here, right? And maybe that is unfair, but also I think it deserves a recognition from both sides that it's a little bit like, can you be aware of how awkward and potentially invasive and insulting you're being? Hopefully that's fair to a certain extent, and I think it's fair to talk about that stuff, as you said, right? Yeah. And to voice it, because that's how we might be aware of what we're doing to others as well.
Yeah, and I think this conversation helps me be a little more relaxed if somebody comes at me with a certain question or a tone. Because ultimately, I think I know I have been unfair in my response, right? Somebody asks a question and I get mad right away. And you've said it 100 times, and it's even, I think, on the cover of your book, right? Life is about how we react. And is it fair for me to react aggressively? I'm not saying it's not. I'm just posing the question.
Well, you mentioned you have a story. I want to hear it.
Yeah, I do. This week, I had gone to... Well, I'm in an apartment complex, and right now with COVID, most amenities are closed down. Well, the pool is open with restrictions, right? You gotta check in, give your ID. They limit the numbers. They limit space, and they close down every 2 hours to sanitize and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I had gone to the pool, and I had dealt with the lady that I've never met before. She was a new face to me. You go to the front door, you can't go in. They come to you, you talk at the door, you exchange license and a pass, whatever. So then you walk around the building to get into the pool. So of course, I gotta walk around to the gate. And I walk awkwardly with FA all by itself. But right now, of course, I walk even more awkwardly because I'm still recovering from the broken femur, right, months ago. As I'm rounding a corner and approaching her, literally, even though her mask is on, I can see the scowl in her forehead and her eyes. And she literally, in this tone, says, "Why are you walking like that?"
Oh.
And, of course... I'm immediately like, WTF, like, who do you think you are? So I don't yell, but I stop, I lock my eyes with her, and I just say, I'm disabled. Be careful with whatever comes out of your mouth next, lady.
Yeah.
And she, like, doesn't respond right away. And she's like, oh, yeah. No, I thought I was cute. I thought maybe you were just walking cute for me or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
of course.
sure. And then I start walking because I can't get, I gotta stay still. I can't do two things at once. So then I'm like, okay, whatever. I start walking past her and again, she's like, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure. And I'm like, it's fine. And she's like, have a good time. As I just walk by and I'm like, you too. So I'm at this point, I'm like, okay, I don't want to be a complete jerk, but I don't want to let her get away with that tone, right? That's not, in my head, that's not a fair approach.
Right.
But then I lay there for an hour, hang out by myself, and I'm struggling with that whole conversation. I'm like, okay, a part of me wants people to ask questions, but the other part of me is like mad and angry and offended.
And wants to kick that lady in the shins, right?
So anyway, it was just an interesting wrestling within myself, because I want people to ask questions and I want to help educate the world around me. But I also felt offended and mad and angry in that moment. And I want to know if anybody can tell me where the middle ground is or how to find it. Oh, Debra. You know what I appreciate about replaying this one is I feel like Debra was somebody we talked about and referred to for a long time. I think we were hashtagging Debra for a minute, and we don't even know her name. Like, she may not even be Debra.
But it's our equivalent of Karen.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, you're absolutely right. Kyle, I like the idea that you brought to the table in us reevaluating where we're at today. This exercise that we're doing right now, I wish politicians would do it. But hey, that's another story, another podcast, another
Reflect
episode.
on how they're behaving.
And be okay with things changing. So, you know what?
Yeah.
I believed that 3 years ago, but not so much today, which is really what we're doing. You brought this up, so I'm wondering, knowing what you know today, if you could go back 3 years, would you do anything different?
I don't know that it would be a whole lot different.
Yeah.
But I would more easily brush it off, which might not be a good response. I don't know if I'm more comfortable with myself now or desensitized to that situation. I don't think I'd engage that person as much.
Sure.
Now.
Do you think you would have taken a free lunch still?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Save a few dollars and not have to get some food. Yeah, I would certainly do that.
Saves a lot of time and energy.
I say that I don't think I'd engage, partly because I don't think I'd get as worked up now.
Sure.
But also, I don't think that I'd be talking about it with you as I might, just because it's a funny thing that happened and we have a podcast, but I don't think it would be as big a thing in my life as it was back then.
Over the last couple of days preparing for this conversation or reviewing and listening to what we talked about 3 years ago, I was wondering about myself. In another clip on that episode, we talked about how you have noticed me and how I've become a little more gracious maybe, or not as quick to bite somebody's head off. I still have my moments, but anyway.
Yeah.
As I was considering that where I'm at today, the big question I wondered, and I bet listeners will have an opinion, I wonder if like you, I'm more relaxed or more gracious because A, I'm older and have been exposed to those situations more and more? Or is it because B, I've been exposed to those situations more and more, so I kind of understand where people come from. So I guess ultimately I'm wondering, is it an age thing? Is it a maturity? Okay, I'm 40 now or 42. I've lived or whatever. Like, is it just natural because I'm older? Or is it more related to being in that position, say 1,000 times, and realizing what's worth my energy and what's not, and what's going to make a difference and what's not, and so on? What do you think it's more of? Having those conversations more and more, or just getting more gray in your beard?
Part of the factor is that we're talking about these things all the time, kind of like what we said in the episode. So we can analyze them from outside the situation and then come to some conclusions and take that into the next interaction. I was super worked up in this conversation about Debra, and then I realized, oh yeah, I was sitting in front of that community center like I discussed. And then we're like, oh, maybe she's not such a jerk if we consider the context. And so I think maybe I take that into the next interaction, but without talking it through, I don't think I would have come to that conclusion and realized the context of the situation. So I think it is about being in those situations more and more, but also talking about them and seeing them for what they really are.
So there's probably a advancement or a evolving in our maturity, not that is automatic because we're older, but more so because we are more careful to assess it and talk about it with a friend and really consider multiple angles so we can better understand maybe where the individual's coming from.
Right.
What's coming to mind for me right now is in the world of retail, or a lot of things we're dealing with people or customer service, and a representative or the employee, they're probably faced with the same questions over and over and over all day long.
Yeah.
And to that employee, they're like, oh my God, don't these people get it? Like, I've said it 1,000 times. Right. But to that individual in front of you, you've only said it once. Yeah. And they haven't got the explanation that you've given 999 other people already. So for them, there's no context. And the challenge for us, whether it's because we work in retail or because we're the disabled one or because X, Y, or Z, the challenge is for us to remember that we're starting at ground zero with every new person we encounter. And that is hard to remember.
I think you're right. A lot of the reaction comes from, we've been through this before. Come on. But no, that's actually not true because it's someone different.
Yep. You've been through it. We have not.
Right, yeah. Speaking of retail and maybe your job, do you react differently when you're representing for the company as when you're representing yourself?
100%. And I even react differently depending on the audience. Mm-hmm. Something that came to mind even before we hit record. I laugh about how I interact with my immediate team, my coworkers, and how I act when I know it's a person that's new to the company. And maybe it's unfair, but it's true, right? And I bet we all do it. We talk to our family differently than we talk to a stranger.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed just this last week, I was working an event with a coworker, and we actually 3 of us, and it was me against them in a particular scenario. And I'm like, no, you don't understand, like this X, Y, or Z. And they were like, no, it doesn't work that way. And we're getting heated. And there's 40 people 20 feet away. But we have music going. They can't hear us, but we're trying to figure out getting on the same page. And right about then, a newer, younger associate walked up and tapped me on the shoulder and was like, hey, I have a question. Can you help me understand something? And I immediately, the switch flipped. Mm-hmm. And I went from yelling at my coworker to be like, oh, yeah, what's going on? Yeah, sure, I can help. And I just realized, wow, I don't know if that's unfair or it's not fake. It's just kind of being familiar with the audience and making sure you don't cut the wrong person's head off or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think you make a good point when you ask that question, because I really do believe we all take those things into consideration. Does this person know my story? If they do, then I might have higher expectations of the way they help me. Does this employee know the rules? If they do, then I have higher expectations that they're following the rules. Whereas if they're a new employee, there's a lot of grace because maybe they haven't been explained that rule or that expectation yet.
So our reaction to Debra changes based on whether she's just a stranger or somebody who works with disability all the time and should know how to have these conversations.
Well, I think some of it, too, is going to be the context that you know her in and for. Because she might work at a hospital or a rehab center and deal with people in wheelchairs every day. But you and I don't know that. Mm-hmm. If you know that, then obviously your expectations of her, I think, will change.
One of the things we said, which was not included in the recording that we played, was, we just need to give people a little grace. And I feel like I've incorporated that into my reactions a little bit, partly because of that conversation. Yeah. And because of conversations with other guests on the show, just realizing that every interaction requires just a couple beats to actually think about and not respond super emotionally, right? And think about what's actually going on. Consider the other person's point of view, and that probably applies to every situation, not just with Debra.
Yeah, I think of those moments where people think I'm drunk. And I've come a long ways in being a little more understanding of that because I put myself in their shoes. The perspective they have is all they've known. They see a guy walking crooked, slurring his speech. Of course they're going to think I'm drunk. Like, I'm the crazy one for thinking they should be automatically thinking, oh, he must be disabled. No, that is not common. So in a sense, I'm the crazy one if I get offended by it.
Yeah.
And something that came to mind as you were moving on, but I'll take us back. When I'm wearing a uniform of any kind, whether I'm wearing the Nugget shirt or the 2 disabled shirts or, anything that is me representing another brand, I'm certainly more careful and more aware of how I drive, how I walk, how I react if Starbucks gets my drink wrong or anything. Because there's an added level of pressure and responsibility to play fair and to be kind.
If we think about that, though, why don't we treat ourselves with as much respect as we treat another brand like 2 Disabled Dudes or Nugget Markets or, we're always representing ourselves.
True.
And so why don't we elevate that to the level of the company or the brand?
I would imagine part of it is because I can't get fired from myself. I can't get in trouble from myself. Nobody's gonna ground me or demote me from me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I guess there is an added level of consequence when you know you're representing your employer. But I think to your point, it shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
We should be acting with that level of kindness and respect, even when we're not at risk of losing our job or getting reprimanded.
I think of self-respect. Like, you and I have so much respect for the podcast and what it does, and you obviously have respect for your work, and I do too. What if we had as much respect for ourselves? And maybe this is misplaced, but I guess this is kind of what I think. Like, if I had as much respect for myself as I do for Farah, then maybe my reactions would be different. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I wonder, is it a level of self-respect to not stand up for yourself? That's what's coming to mind for me. When I react, it's not because I'm in a bad mood and I just want to yell at somebody. It's because I want people to understand, and I get frustrated, and I want to educate them. Maybe I'm not taking the best approach, but I just want to help people understand that it's not as black and white or as simple as people think or whatever. So would it still be a form of self-respect to just brush it off? Or would it be more self-respectful to sort of stand up for yourself and defend yourself and what you're up against in life? I don't know the answer. I'm not saying, either way, but that's what comes to mind when you pose that question. And I guess I would lean towards defending myself is a form of self-respect.
I agree. And one of the things we said in episode 114 is that it's all about tone and how you present standing up for yourself. If it's in a respectful way towards that other person, that's probably a lot more effective, and it's a lot more self-respecting too.
Absolutely. And we've talked about that too. I forget the episode, but probably not that long ago, where it's just different. Depending on how you respond and how your tone, people are going to be receptive or they're going to completely shut down. So certainly a valid point to reiterate there.
Sean, I'm so glad we had this conversation because I feel like we might even have it again for sure. It's kind of an endless thing of just trying to figure out how to react to other people because we're dealing with something fairly unique that other people don't encounter all the time.
Sure. And I'm glad we're having this conversation because I have a strong desire to see you get better.
Oh, man. I think the same. Jokes aside, we need to move on to thank you notes because both of us know how powerful it is to show gratitude on a regular basis. And Sean, we conclude every episode with these thank you notes. Who do you have to thank today?
I've started using an app called Scannable. And what Scannable allows me to do is basically use the camera on my phone to scan a piece of paper or whatever. And it automatically cuts out all the edges, makes it a clean copy, and it makes it either a picture or a PDF.
Oh, yeah.
So it's been a game changer when it comes to needing to save documents, such as receipts, but documents I don't necessarily want in my pocket or my hand or my bag or whatever. I've only been using it now 3 or 4 months, and holy cow, I love it. I can upload right away to Google. I can email it to myself. I can save it in my photo. I can do a lot with it.
Nice.
You need it too, because you and I were talking about receipts and you lost them. Get Scannable, man. Scan it and throw that receipt away. You don't need the paperwork.
Thanks for that tip. That's perfect. My thank you note goes out to Broadway. Just all Broadway in general. Okay. Yeah, all of Broadway. Because I went to a show yesterday. It's called Goodnight Oscar with Sean Hayes. I heard about it on the Smart List podcast.
Yep.
And it was so good. And he was so powerful. And just the whole concept of the play. You know, when a play or a musical or whatever it is makes it to Broadway, they have worked out all the kinks. They have the best actors. It's just the cream of the crop, right? No matter what play it is. And so I have a lot of admiration and gratitude for that because we had a really great time. And anytime I go to Broadway, I know I'm going to have a good time because it's going to be an amazing show because it's only the best.
I've yet to see an actual Broadway show in New York City, so it's certainly on my list.
Well, Sean, thank you for the incredibly valuable conversation once again. Check out the full episode of 114. It published in August of 2020, and so you can kind of recognize the difference in the conversation between then and now, which is the point of what we're doing today. So check that out at twodisableddudes.com, episode 223. Think about sharing this with a friend if you enjoyed listening today. And while you're at it, why don't you go to your podcast app and leave a review? It really helps out the show. Until next time, keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to donate.
Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app.